My name is Ramona. Standing here on my balcony, overlooking the vast ocean with the salty wind caressing my face, I'm reminded of the long-standing battle with my family. Just moments ago, I shut the door on them for the final time. Their broken expressions, the pleading in their voices, it's all fresh in my mind. But this wasn't a sudden turn of events, it was the culmination of years of pain and betrayal. 9 years ago, I was a young girl full of dreams, living in a family that seemed normal on the surface. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were well known in the local business community. My father was a shrewd businessman, always focused on making more money and expanding his influence. My mother was a socialite, more concerned with her image and status in society. And then there was my brother, Ethan, 5 years older than me. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. One fateful night, everything changed. Ethan had brought his new girlfriend, Lily, home. I was in the living room, just minding my own business, when an argument broke out between Ethan and me. It was a trivial matter, a disagreement over the TV channel. But Ethan, always quick-tempered, lost his cool. Before I knew it, his fist came crashing across my face. The pain was excruciating, and the sound of the impact echoed in the silent room. Lily, standing beside him, sneered at me. "You're such a loser, Ramona. You'll never amount to anything." And what hurt the most was my parents' reaction. They just stood there, watching, as if I was a stranger. Instead of scolding Ethan, they sided with him. My mother said, "You should have just given in to your brother. You're causing all this trouble." My father simply nodded in agreement, his eyes cold and distant. That night, I left home with nothing but a swollen cheek and a broken heart. I had nowhere to go, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. For the next 9 years, there were no calls, no apologies, no visits. It was as if I had never been a part of that family. They whispered lies about me in the town, saying I was a rebellious and ungrateful child. But I refused to let their words break me. I worked hard, taking on multiple jobs to support myself. I started small, with a little online business. Slowly but surely, I built it into a multi-million-dollar empire. I bought this oceanfront mansion, with its glass walls and breathtaking views. I had power at my fingertips, the kind of life they once mocked me for dreaming about. Just yesterday, they showed up at my gates. My parents, hand in hand with Ethan, looking desperate. They didn't ask if they could stay, they announced, "We're moving in." 9 years of silence, 9 years of pain, all dismissed with such arrogance. I looked at them, calm and cold, and locked the gate. I knew this was just the beginning of my revenge. The knocking on the gate didn't stop. It grew louder and angrier. I watched them through the cameras on my phone from my glass-walled living room. Ethan's face had aged, but the lines of arrogance were still carved deep. My parents looked smaller and weaker than I remembered, but their voices were still sharp. "Ramona, open this gate. We're family. We have a right," my mother barked. The word family stung like a knife. 9 years ago, I had begged them to love me, to see me as their daughter. Instead, they let Ethan hurt me and turned a blind eye. I pressed the intercom button and said, "You cut me off. You erased me, remember? What right do you think you have now?" There was a moment of silence. Then my father coughed, his pride cracking. "We lost the house and the business. Ethan is in debt. We need somewhere to stay." I almost laughed. They had traded me for Ethan, and he had led them to ruin. "I have space," I said, letting a glimmer of hope appear in their eyes. "But not for you." Ethan slammed his fist against the gate. "You ungrateful little." I cut the feed. I wasn't that hurt girl anymore. I was Ramona, the woman who had built a kingdom from the ashes they left behind. That night, as the ocean wind howled against my windows, I couldn't sleep. Memories of that night 9 years ago came flooding back. I remembered standing in the driveway with a swollen cheek, my parents avoiding my eyes, and Ethan's smirk. I poured myself a glass of wine, pulled up my laptop, and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. It was full of receipts, records of every debt, lawsuit, and shady transaction Ethan had made under our family's name. I had been collecting this evidence all these years, waiting for the right time. The next morning, I strolled down my marble steps and unlocked the gate. My mother rushed forward, fake tears in her eyes. "Ramona, please. We didn't mean it. You know blood is thicker than water." I remembered her words from years ago, "You're a disgrace to this family." I tilted my head and said, "You want a place here? Fine. Sign this." I held out a document that stripped Ethan of his power of attorney over my father's ruined company and transferred their remaining assets under my oversight. Their faces turned pale. Ethan lunged for the paper, snarling, "What game are you playing?" I stepped back, sipping my coffee. "The kind where I finally win." He laughed mockingly, but his eyes showed fear. He knew they needed me. The gate closed again, and I whispered to myself, "Let them sweat." By the third day, their begging turned to threats. Ethan paced outside the gate, shouting, "You think that house makes you better than us? You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for this family." I leaned over the railing and said, "You're right. I wouldn't have anything if I had stayed under your roof, believed your lies, and remained small so you could feel big." My mother tried to guilt-trip me. "Ramona, you can't erase us. We're your parents." I smiled faintly. "And yet, you erased me first." That evening, I hosted a private dinner at my mansion. I invited investors, bankers, and some society names who used to know my parents. As the dining hall glittered with candlelight, I projected a slideshow on the wall. It showed how they had funneled my savings into Ethan's failing ventures, the loan defaults, and the properties foreclosed. It also revealed the lies they had spread about me. The room fell silent, and then gasps spread. People started whispering and shaking their heads. My parents stood at the back, pale as ghosts. Ethan's fists were clenched so tight, I thought he'd break his bones. I raised my glass and said, "To family, the ones who teach us the hardest lessons." The applause was thunderous, for me. That night, I not only locked them out of my gate but also out of their own reputations. The fallout was swift. By sunrise, the news had spread through town. Bankers demanded meetings, business partners pulled out, and even Ethan's girlfriend, Lily, packed her things and left. My phone was buzzing with desperate voicemails, apologies, and pleas. I let them pile up. By noon, my parents were back at the gate, this time broken. My father leaned on the fence, and my mother's makeup was streaked. "Ramona, we have nowhere else to go. Please, just let us in," she pleaded. For a moment, I felt that old tug of guilt. But then I remembered the pain, the humiliation. I shook my head and said, "You made your choice when you chose him over me." Ethan pounded the gate and threatened me, but his threats were hollow. He had nothing left. I walked down the steps and stood in front of the gate. "You spent 9 years treating me like a burden. Now look at you, crawling back to me." My mother dropped to her knees. "Please, Ramona. Just one chance." I let the silence stretch, then said, "One chance? That's all I ever asked for." And I turned away. 3 days later, while I was at a charity gala, I got an alert on my phone. The motion sensors indicated a gate breach. I wasn't surprised. When I checked the live feed, there they were, Ethan hauling bags and my parents following like shadows. I didn't rush home. I let them unpack and think they had one. In the morning, I returned with the police. Ethan was wearing one of my silk robes, looking bleary-eyed. He was shocked to see the police. The officer said, "You're trespassing, sir. This property is legally owned by Ms. Ramona." My parents came out of the kitchen, holding mugs of my coffee. Their faces were drained of color. Ramona, wait, my mother said. But I showed them the proof of ownership, the security footage of the break-in, and the restraining orders I had filed. This isn't your home. It never was. My mother's cup slipped and shattered. My father's shoulders sagged. Ethan lunged at me, but the officer stopped him. The police escorted them out, and their bags were dumped on the driveway. Neighbors watched, recording the whole thing. By the end of the week, the tabloids had the story. But the article told the truth about my family's downfall. Calls from reporters, former business partners, and even old friends poured in. I told them my side of the story, calm and clear. Within days, Ethan's empire collapsed completely. Investors fled, and his accounts were frozen. My parents tried to find support, but no one would help them. Their once polished reputation was in ruins. Then came the final knock on my door. They were standing there, no bags, no arrogance, just ruin. Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, and his voice was hoarse. Please, Ramona. I can't keep sleeping in the car. Just one loan. I'll pay it back. My father's voice cracked as he said, we were wrong about everything. Please don't let us go down like this. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably. For a brief moment, the girl they had abandoned 9 years ago wanted to forgive them. But I stood tall and said, you all made sure I knew where I stood in this family. Now the world knows where you stand. Their faces fell, and hope left their eyes. I shut the door, and this time, it was final. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no laughter. Just quiet. The kind of quiet I had longed for since that night when Ethan's fist split my lip and my parents turned their backs on me. I walked through my mansion, the sunlight streaming through the glass, and the waves crashing against the rocks like applause I finally deserved. I started funding scholarships in my name and supporting shelters. I knew that revenge wasn't about destroying them, it was about refusing to be destroyed myself. And as I stand on my balcony at night, the wind carrying the scent of salt and freedom, I know that I was never the stain. I was the fire, and their silence is the only apology I'll ever need.